We've done a lot of business analytics now with individual clinics to know that for each clinic, when patients are counseled with a Univfy report, they are more likely to proceed and go on to IVF. And for some clinics, that might be a twofold increase. For some clinics, that might be up to a fivefold increase. So we're really excited. And it also seems that we've been doing these business analytics for 4 to 5 years now consecutively. So what we're seeing is also that this kind of increase in IVF conversion continues to increase over time.
80% of patients are not helped in the IVF patient journey because they don't make it all the way through. Could be the case. I explore this today with Dr. Mylene Yao, the CEO of Univfy, and we go through the patient journey at different points, talking about IVF conversion, talking about patient dropout. We talk about how AI is using individualized predictive outcomes, and specifically how Univfy is using that AI for individualized predictive outcomes to solve for challenges on the provider end and on the patient end. You can actually see this visual too for free if you go to univfy.com/IVF patient retention. So this is something for you to look into. AI is here. Univfy has been using it for years. It's impacting every point of the patient journey, every point of your workflow, and it needs to work in your favor. So this is a solution for you to investigate. And the more the demographics of our patient generations advance, the more this becomes a must-have. For previous generations, artificial intelligence, individualized predictive outcomes may have been a nice to have. Now they're a must to have. You have millennials, you have Generation Z entering your practice, and they're not satisfied with generalized outcomes. They want individualized prediction models. They want it coming from artificial intelligence. They want it coming from your data. They need it in order to make decisions in many cases. Dr. Yao, Mylene, welcome to Inside Reproductive Health.
Hi, Griffin. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. I knew you first as an entrepreneur. I think the first time I knew of you was actually at an ARM event some years back. It must have been several years back now because it's been a long time since ARM has been in Chicago. And so I knew you first as CEO, and then come to find out you are a physician by training, and then come to find out some more. Not just a physician, but you actually were an OBGYN. You practiced in women's health. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's correct. I started my career as an OBGYN, first really focused on the clinical side, grew up in Toronto, did my medical training in Montreal, did my residency there at McGill University, and graduated from University of Toronto. And then really felt passionate about reproductive health and went to Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston to do my clinical REI fellowship there. Learned a great deal from really amazing people, and then caught the research bug and went into academic research, which I really, was passionate about as well.
You go on to start a company, and I want to talk about how that journey came to be. I'm also interested in the problems it solved, because when I think of Univfy, I think of IVF conversion. So was that the first problem that you sought out to solve? Was there another problem that you came across your research that made you start Univfy? Which came first?
I was really an academic researcher. I was faculty at Stanford University in the Department of OBGYN, where I led NIH-funded research projects that focused on embryo development, early embryo development, oocyte development, and so on. And one question, and I think that's the benefit of being a clinician scientist at the time, is when I saw patients in the fertility center, patients just really want to know, what are the chances of having a baby? So I think that was my initial motivation, and still is. We want to be able to give very accurate and personalized information to patients so that they can make the best decisions about how to proceed to have a family.
Mylene, how are you using artificial intelligence to solve this? Because one of the artificial intelligence for, I would say 3 years ago, it was good enough to kind of just talk about generally in the field. Oh, here's how it's going to come in. And then I've heard at ASRM and PCRS, when someone's talking about AI, they'll say, oh, it's the same talk. It's going to change the world. And people are interested in the specific use cases of AI now. And so this is a good opportunity to see how AI is not down the road, it's here. And in what cases are you using artificial intelligence now to solve this problem?
I think recently, just with a lot of interesting stories in the media, we're all made more aware of the power of AI. But maybe let's start with, there are many different types of AI. So there's no, right now, there's not a robot, a chat GPT doing your IVF prediction model. So in the field of AI, there are different types. Like there's the original vision that AI experts had from long ago, that AI is going to be this super intelligent kind of machine that can do everything like a human and better than a human. Can talk, can have emotions, can do all these things, can calculate numbers that we can't, can run faster, whatever. We're not talking about that kind of AI. That's more like general AI. And that vision, I would say the world is getting closer, but there's still a huge gap. And we're not focusing on that right now. There's another kind of AI, which is really what is behind a lot of processes now, which is narrow AI. And narrow AI sounds narrow, and it is for good reason. Narrow AI means using AI to do a very specific task very well, better than humans, faster than humans, more accurately than humans. Mostly not because humans are not smart, because it is really leveraging, cloud computing and can do a lot of calculations in a very short time at very little cost, right? So narrow AI is what we do, and it's what most, businesses do to support their customers. And within that, there's also machine learning is a big part of this narrow AI, and kind of bring it to the healthcare in general. You have a lot of healthcare now use AI to support radiologists, to support pathologists, and that's where you're using really imaging and deep learning to use imaging to support, kind of call out some maybe an MRI that is more questionable, more likely to have cancer or something like that. There are tons of studies and tons of applications there already. And, but there's also a different kind of AI in the general healthcare, like, which patients are most likely to come back to the ER after we discharge them from hospital? Because if we can identify those patients, we can implement better prevention programs. Or which patients in the ICU right now have a high risk of crashing, and let's put more kind of monitoring on that patient. These are things that already are being used. And then in our fertility space, what we do see right now that are really emerging is you hear a lot about what embryologists talk about, which is using imaging AI to try to detect the embryos that are most likely to be viable and so on. But what we're talking about here, what Univfy does, is not that at all. It's a different kind of AI. We're using AI and machine learning to analyze structured data. And structured data means the data sets, the data that is in your EMR, the data that is in your SART export, or in your billing data, in your billing records, is really making use of that data so that we can get the smartest information out of it to inform all the things that you need to do in the clinical setting. So that's the AI that we're focusing on. And in particular, our platform is designed, and we got very good at building IVF prediction models for each specific clinic, using a clinic's own data, validated by their own outcomes. And we have, we're, I think, the only company with this high scalability of being able to do that, we're really having a lot of quality assurance in order to provide this level of service at the point of care where you could use it with your patients. So I think that maybe helps to frame, what is the AI that we're using, and going from there, now with that kind of prediction model that is specific to your patients, what can you use it for? What are all the things that you can do faster, smarter, better as a result of being informed by that model?
One of those things that I want to zoom in on is financial risks. How does that AI, that use of AI that you're all doing, go far beyond the reconciling of financial risks to remove financial risk? And what's the difference between those two things?
A very important part of our platform is that we're very adaptable. We already start off with many questions and analyses that most centers want and need, but we're also very adaptable. Like if there are specific unique situations that you want to analyze, we can do that too. But we also, in addition to the IVF outcomes model, we also analyze utilization of care. So, for example, we've now analyzed utilization of care for over 100,000, unique patients. And so, what that means is we can chart for every unique patient what are all the services that they've kind of received from your center and over what period of time, because time matters to the patients, because their biological clock is ticking, but time matters to the clinics too, because you are investing in the patients that you see, because you're investing a lot of manpower and a lot of support to help them get to having a family. And so we take all of that into account, so the analyses could be really accounting for the operational cost, the utilization. And the reason this IVF outcomes prediction model is important is, not surprisingly, let's say you have 4 prognostic groups, right? Just making it up. It could be 3, it could be 4, it could be 5, whatever. The people with the best prognosis in that group, they actually will have a lot more utilization of FETs because they have more cryopreserved blastocysts, and so on and so forth. And maybe patients in the lowest prognostic group may have the least number of FETs. And so the kind of average weighted revenue that you would get as a business from these different groups is going to be very different. And so, again, if there's not a stratification, you're really looking at all operational costs, all revenue as kind of a lump sum. And that's really really doesn't help you to optimize, strategy and growth and planning, or, making your operation more efficient. So those are the ways in which what started out as an IVF prediction model that is so important to support the patient counseling, gives patients what they want, is also the fundamental model that can support a lot of business decisions as well.
There's a lot of uncertainty in the patient journey, and we just had an event about it through ARM yesterday, going through the whole patient journey. And there's countless points where there's uncertainty, and there can be points for drop off. Every time the patient feels like they have to make a decision and they don't have the information, or they don't know how to weigh the pros and cons of the decision,
Right.
indecision is always a motivator for inaction. And so for you all, what were the biggest points that you were seeing where patients were dropping out? How did you look at that?
Patients want to have a family. They're ready seeing a doctor, which means they're motivated. They want to do something about it. And not knowing your personalized, probability of success is a big barrier, especially since many patients know, maybe friends or have heard in the media by now. I mean, everybody has heard good and bad experiences from IVF. But the problem is that all of those stories aren't personalized to them. what happens to another person may not be their situation. And the most important thing is really to figure out, based on the patient's profile, what is really her probability of having a baby from not just IVF, but compared to other treatments such as IUI or other options, or even not doing any treatment, so that people can have some good visibility as to, the pros and cons of different treatments, but also the cost, of course. And it's not just that it's expensive. I think this is complex because, in addition to the expense, if someone, we'll talk about people that are paying out of pocket, and then we can talk about people with coverage. People paying completely out of pocket, in addition to the expense, there is a chance that it might not work, which means their money to them, the way the patients rightfully would perceive, is their money went down the drain. There is no purchase, and in the US, let's say the cost of IVF justifiably is high because of all the expectations we as patients have from this treatment. So it can, depending on where you are in the US, it could be somewhere between 10 to 20 or even 30,000 all in by the time you include everything, FET, ICSI, and if you choose to do PGTA. So for the patient, for as consumers, there's really no consumer purchase like that where you pay that amount of money and you may not get the product, which is the baby. Now, from the provider side, we care a lot about provider empathy. Providers are working so hard. Their teams are really going all out for these patients. So they're providing top quality care. So the question is, well, how do you reconcile, the two things? You have centers providing excellent care. You have patients feeling like they paid and didn't get what they want. So that's kind of a question. More and more, look, I didn't realize this. I started out as an academic researcher and a clinician so my journey with Univfy and leading Univfy, it was like peeling an onion one layer at a time. Like, oh, patients need individualized care. Patients need personalized prognosis. Oh, patients need a way to cap their financial risks, not necessarily even cost, but the risks that they perceive. Oh, patients need to be educated because, many people may not succeed on the first try, even though IVF is a very effective treatment and is the most effective and safest treatment. But they may need more than one treatment to have a family. And some people may not succeed even if they try 3 times. But how do you put that together to educate the patients so they see it as a course of treatment, but also so that the pricing can reflect that?
What you're talking about, what you're tugging at, is that there is something beyond clinical outcomes relative to the standard of care. Clinical outcomes are requisite. They're absolutely necessary. They're insufficient in terms of just categorizing all of the standard of care. When you're talking about, you have the quality of treatment, that's kind of like the product. When you're talking about the market problem, that's really talking about the delivery. And if we were to use a simple example, let's say we have the best pizza in town. It's the very best pizza. That's the best product, our clinical outcomes. But then you also have, if we don't have parking for the pizza parlor, if there's no way to order, they don't answer the phone, there's no way to order via app, if they can't take electronic payment, if it takes an hour and 45 minutes to get your pizza, it doesn't matter how good the product is, because the delivery, what you're talking about, the market problem, is irreconcilable to how good the product is. And that when we think of the standard of care as just clinical outcomes, that's what we're doing. We're thinking of just the pizza. And what you're talking about is talking about the rest of what the standard of care is.
Well, Griffin, that's a great analogy, and I would maybe expand it a little bit. Clinical outcomes are the most important things, but it needs to be stratified and personalized. When you lump everybody together and call it clinical outcomes, there's really no visibility to what are you improving. So, for example, I think you don't need to be a doctor to know. By now, we all have friends and family that have, been touched by cancer, right? So if you were to go, every patient knows, even if you don't have cancer, well, you for people who need chemotherapy, there's a course of chemo. You don't just go in once and say, oh, what's the remission rate from doing one session? Your oncologist is going to tell you, well, this course of chemo is going to consist of, 3 visits or 6 visits or whatever, or this is the adjunct therapy, and this is the remission rate that you could expect. And so, there's kind of a framework for that, and that's also going to be stratified by, oh, this patient has stage 1. This is the right protocol for her, or this patient has stage 2 of this particular kind of cancer. Now, fertility, condition is not cancer, but I think there are many studies that have shown when you ask patients, they do, kind of explain the stress and, the mental burden is really similar to what, patients with other conditions are, kind of can experience. But I think as a field, we don't do good enough a job to really kind of figure out this course of treatment so that we can give patients a view of what their maximum potential of having a family could be like, and also package it in a way so that they could actually, afford it and achieve it. And I think what a lot of people don't know is this does not have to come at like a huge cost to the fertility centers. And this is what is not like you have to give anything away for free. You can still be growing profitable, a very healthy, really successful business, but there's a way to package it so that it's a win-win.
I also want to touch on this stratification piece a bit that you brought up, because there's a cost for not stratifying it. So you were correct in saying the clinical outcomes need to be stratified, and they do, because when we just say things like IVF has an 80% success rate, there is a big asterisk. And what Dr. Yao is talking about is you have to stratify that asterisk. And I can tell people on a marketing side, on a patient satisfaction side, if you don't stratify that from the beginning, you are begging to have consequences to your online reputation. That's very often where the negative reviews come in, is where people feel that they're misled. I know none of our listeners feel like they mislead people, and I know they don't intentionally do, but I hear clinicians all the time, Mylene, say IVF has an 80% success rate. It's like, yeah, if A, B, and C are true, if you're under 35, if you're doing 3 cycles, if we just say IVF has an 80% success rate, then inevitably we're going to disappoint some people. And so
Griffin, that's really interesting because I'm actually seeing a bit of the opposite. So there are 2 flip sides to this. A lot of patients, when they Google online, they're going to see the average IVF success rate from the CDC. And what they're seeing is a number in the 30s. Okay. So there's that side, and they can come in feeling like, oh, IVF has such a low success rate. And in fact, a lot of people I've heard would say, why does IVF have such a high failure rate? And at first I was like, what are you talking about? IVF is a very effective treatment. And we're all talking apples and oranges. And your example is great too. There's the other flip side. And so I feel like, everyone's saying this. Everyone is factual, but everyone's talking about different things. And then we want to bring kind of some ways for this communication to really be very clear. And in fact, what we find is that when we're in the business of building IVF success prediction models, we have, built models and analyze IVF cycles and outcomes for many clinics now. Very diverse kind of data sets that we've seen, all the way, from smaller, private individual centers, all the way to large academic centers or centers with multiple locations and so on. So we've seen really a wide range of patient clinical profiles and different socioeconomic demographics. And so we're seeing that in general, doctors are underselling IVF when the prognosis is not personalized. Because actually, what we do see is most clinicians are really kind of shy to talk about IVF and how successful it can be, just because they feel like, well, I don't want the patients to feel I'm pushing them down this path because it's more expensive. I don't want them to feel like I have any business agenda. I better not, you know, say, give them some high numbers. And that actually is not doing patients a service as well, because, and we see that a lot actually when we talk to centers, and they would say, well, maybe some doctors feel more confident, some really are more shy about it. But at the end of the day, it's because there's not a model and the data driving their conversation that is tailored to their center. So the doctors don't really know. Well, I really think, if you ask me honestly, I think this patient has a 70 to 80% success in one cycle because I think she has all the best, she has the best profile. But I feel worried to tell her that because I don't want her to think that I'm being pushy or, get a bad review, like you said, because there's still a 1 in 5 chance that it may not work for her in the first cycle. So in that situation, what we're seeing is actually being too conservative is also not doing a service to the patients, because they come in, they want a family, they want to know, whether they should do this treatment or what they should expect. So there's really one very, I would say easy, because it's available now, which is, well, just use the data-driven approach. We can build an IVF prediction model that is using that clinic specific data, their own data, validated with their own outcomes, and really kind of customize in a way to, in the patient report, which is the report used to counsel the patients, and the doctors would use this. So Univfy is not part of, providing the medical counseling at all. We're just supporting the providers. And in that conversation, the doctors can feel confident. This is based on data from our own center. This has been validated. It just makes them, really be able to communicate the actual, facts without worrying about, patients not trusting them or anything. So in fact, we find that, patients, it really helps patients and doctors to build confidence in their relationship as well.
I recommend that people go to the Univfy website. We'll link it in the show notes. We'll link a couple of different things that are useful visuals for our listeners for the concepts that we're talking about. You can actually see some of these things, and there's sample pre-IVF report that you can see on the Univfy website. So I recommend that people go and take advantage of that. And I guess as you're talking, Mylene, I'm thinking, oh yeah, this is why you need individualized predictive outcomes, because you can err on either side of the spectrum. You can either be too bullish and then ultimately, even if you're not saying, and I don't think most people are saying, oh, there's 80% success rates, but they feel like, oh, we're going to get you a baby. And it doesn't always it doesn't always happen. It's too anecdotal. It might be too based on temperament or too based on optimism. And on the flip side, very often we see we wasted so much time with this clinic because we needed IVF and they didn't tell us that, and we went some other place.
Right.
So you're right. It's a spectrum. You can err on other side. This is why you need to have individualized predictive outcomes, and you're seeing this on all of the patient side. So on the provider side, on the clinic side, what does it look like for dropout and conversion from start of someone coming into the office and having a consult and then leaving with a healthy baby? What are the dropout points that you're seeing typically?
Right. So I'm kind of speaking this generically, but what we do, just so that you have the context for, we're all about data and we're all data driven. So everything that I say is really from our platform's firsthand experience in analyzing data. So when we work with providers, what we do is we actually analyze the utilization of care. And that's how we would know at every step. Let's say 100 people, 100 patients come in and make appointment for a new patient visit, and they are candidates for IVF. We're not talking about people coming in for surgery or other things, right? And what happens to them? They also, a lot of times, patients are thinking about what's less expensive. Should I do IUI? Should I wait? Should I try on my own a little bit further? Should I, go to another clinic and see what's available there? These are all very, typical kind of mindset and questions that people have. So they come in and every clinic's going to be a little bit different. I'm just kind of making it more general right now. So we look at, patients coming in for the initial consultation and what percentage of patients actually complete their diagnostic workup. Let's say they're new patients. And that's a very important indicator, because if you can't complete the diagnostic workup, I mean, it's difficult for the provider to make a diagnosis and offer you the treatment options. And then, but at that point, when the patients come back after they've completed their diagnostic workup, and the doctor's telling them, oh, based on the testing and your history and, examining you, this is your clinical diagnosis. You have tubal factor, you have PCOS, you have male factor, what have you, or maybe you have more than one diagnosis. And here's my recommendation. You have an option to do IVF, blah, blah, and this is your success rate that you can expect, or you have an option of doing IUI. And doctors are really excellent in explaining the pros and cons of different treatments. But patients really need more than that to really help them make this decision. They really want to know, especially if they don't have full coverage, they really want to know, okay, how much am I spending and what does that mean? And now, if they are sophisticated and having done a lot of research, they might say, oh, what if it doesn't work? And if they're not, the counseling should also support that, because otherwise, if a patient has not been kind of educated in the risk of failure and what might happen next, then the dropout rate could be very high. So for example, all comers, so that we're just keeping things general, but when we do this analysis, is specific to each center to help inform how they can improve their patient awareness programs and things like that. So, but generically, for patients who are paying out of pocket, the dropout rate can be as high as 80%. And that's really, really unfortunate, because that means these patients are not benefiting really maximally from IVF treatment. And a lot of times it's not just that they can't afford another treatment. I think it just seems really intimidating to be paying another amount, not knowing whether you can have a baby or not. And so that's why, by educating patients and putting together, not, in addition to a personalized medical prognosis, to put together a financial plan that can help them achieve that, even though, okay, nobody has a 100% success rate, but how can we put together a plan to help you achieve 80% success rate or 70%? And for some patients, maybe they have very poor prognosis. Maybe 3 cycles could give them 50% success rate. Or patients who may really be a good idea for them to start thinking about donor egg, to really think about that as like an overall plan or an option. So those are the things that the Univfy report can support, and we can also support the clinics in designing these pricing programs in a way that's really a win-win. And, patients feel really comfortable knowing that, there's a way to, achieve a certain amount of success.
I want to talk to you about how you help clinics implement this because you all have been around for a little while. And one of the differences between the companies that have been around for many years versus those that run through their VC money and then they're gone in a year or two is that they can't figure out how to get the clinic to adopt the solution with the clinic's workflow. Clinic workflow, as we say every other episode on this show, is one of the biggest barriers to scalability in this field because there's so much variance between clinics workflow, and it makes it hard for people that even when they do have a really good solution, again, this kind of goes back to quality of product, but you also have to have quality of delivery, or else even though the quality of product comes first, it's a moot point if you don't have the delivery to be able to do it. So I bet you've learned some hard
Your pizza
lessons.
analogy. Yeah, definitely. We, at one point when we first started, we were that best pizza parlor but how do we do this? How do we get the pizza, right? So we definitely had some tough lessons that we learned. And, I think all of digital healthcare had to learn some tough lessons early on. And we're really excited. There's one thing maybe just to mention. So recently, we've been named top 150 global digital healthcare companies by CB Insights. So that's a really great honor. And I think a lot of what went into that to being named there is the delivery. And so I think we start with the philosophy in our company, and this is a philosophy that across the company is top of mind all the time. Of course, we're all doing this to support the patients so that they can have a family. But that is not possible if we don't have provider empathy. Provider empathy, we always talk about patient empathy. That goes without saying. But provider empathy is not something you hear people talk about a lot. And we really focus on that. Oh, what does the provider team have to do? Picture what they're dealing with, all the things that they have to do to support their patients. So how can we, as a technology company, make it as easy as possible? So now what we have, I won't walk you guys through all the phases of how we got here, but what we have now, and I'm really also grateful to the providers that have worked with us and have given us so much feedback and put their trust in us to let us improve on our delivery. And so what we have today is really that white glove AI plus human expert platform. The human component is so important. It's always been there, but we realize we shouldn't call this an AI platform, it's human plus AI, because we have really amazing humans kind of, shepherding, the process. So what a provider can expect is, there's not a duplicate data entry. If you put data into the EMR, there's EMR integration. And a big effort was actually that we're really excited about is that recently we completed integration on the back end with eIVF. And so there is this very seamless and customized integration for each clinic. We understand that clinics use the EMR modules in different ways. And so they don't need to worry that all that is taken into account. And so it's been amazing to work with the eIVF team to be able to bring this integrated service. So now with a click of a button, provider teams can generate a report and give it to their patients. However, we also have some clinics that say, oh, well, we really want to be supported by, your team. And there we also have Univfy Fertility Concierge, which is a team of just amazing people, that are registered nurses, and they have decades of experience working with providers and patients, knowing the language, knowing that what it's like to be in a busy clinic. So we have a lot of empathy there. And our fertility concierge can support our clients by really helping them run the reports as well, and even keeping track of so many things. So you could be using Univfy Report and hardly lifting a finger, and not needing to track a lot of things. And we can do a lot of tracking. Oh, we see these patients are going to be coming in for their reconsult. Hey, here are all the Univfy reports ready for your doctor to use. That's the kind of white glove service that we have. And of course, there's some hybrid. So, whatever a clinic needs, like, oh, we want some IT support and some human support, whatever that is already can be configured as well.
I think if you can't figure out how to help clinics implement it, it's just a moot point. And frankly, it does take a lot of hand holding. It does take it. It isn't just here's your automated solution.
And a very big part of what we do is always customer first. So while eIVF integration is the first that we accomplished, many customers are requesting EMR integrations now, and they're using other EMRs, and we are doing that as well. So we do whatever is needed, whether it's eIVF or another EMR, we do whatever is needed so that the customers can have the best experience. And I think that in turn, when the provider team is less burdened, they in turn can give better service to their patients as well. So we really believe in, supporting the provider team so that ultimately the patients will get, the right kind of attention.
You must have somehow also figured out the other sticky issue, which is pricing, because sometimes it doesn't work. It ends up being too much of an intermediary, and you can either take a piece of the pie or you can make the pie bigger. And the way that people use pricing matters for which of those it ends up being. So, how did you decide on the model that you use?
Right. So there are really two sides. So to be just the easiest way to explain our pricing is a SaaS fee. So that's software as a service or AI as a service, which means we make it very feasible as a monthly flat fee. And it's also customized. So now we have an algorithm for, providing an algorithm. So to be very objective, very fair, we take into account your center specifics, like your pricing, because the pricing can vary so much across the country and around the world. Pricing, your IVF volume, and even the percentage of patients that come from coverage or reimbursement, knowing that reimbursement is usually less. So we account for all of this to make it feasible. And so, most centers don't find that pricing is really a barrier at all. And on the other hand, getting the ROI is very important. The AI platform is, yes, its utilization is really inexpensive, but also at the same time, we recognize that knowing the ROI is very important for a business. So we really look at it as, if you are going to get a certain amount of increase in IVF conversion, and if you get even not even one additional conversion a month, it will be more, it will pay for the Unify's fees, um, you know, and have excess. And so that's kind of like our principle. And the conversion, going back to, what you started out discussing, it is important because it is really another word for, helping more patients be able to access care. And there, we find, and we've done a lot of business analytics now with individual clinics, to know that for each clinic, when patients are counseled with a Unify report, they are more likely to proceed and go on to IVF. And for some clinics, that might be a twofold increase. For some clinics, that might be up to a fivefold increase. So we're really excited. And it also seems that we've been doing these business analytics for, 4 to 5 years now consecutively. So what we're seeing is also that this kind of increase in IVF conversion continues to increase over time. And the more reports that or the more patients you give reports to, the more expanded access you're going to get. So these are some trends that we've observed from working with individual clinics. But now what we've done is, and also really grateful to clinics that want to give this information back to other providers and patients and everybody in the space, is we're forming research collaboration. We now have 8 centers that have joined the research collaboration, and more that are joining. And they're giving us permission, and it's all IRB approved and everything, to aggregate all of these analytics. So it is not like when we provide a service to each clinic, that's business analytics. But when it's aggregated and we report utilization of service back to the public, that's research. And so we're doing that right now, and we're really excited. We have a manuscript that we're preparing right now in its final stages of drafting. And it's definitely, we can't wait, until we share the science behind it and the analytics, with everybody, so that we can help, more patients be able to access care.
And you have a third constituent, which is employers. So if we were having this conversation 20 years ago, that third constituent probably wouldn't enter the conversation. You wouldn't want your employer to know anything about your fertility treatment at that time. And now they are among the people that are the most interested constituent in clinical outcomes, in individualized care, because this is the benefit that they're offering to their employees. And if they're not happy, if the employees aren't happy, then the employers aren't happy. It doesn't work as a benefit for the employer if it doesn't work for the employees. So how does Univfy work with employers?
Right. So we're getting a lot of interest from employers, because what they want, and maybe just to, not all employers have the same type of benefits, right? We have really amazing benefits companies now, like, Progeny, Carrot, Maven, Kindbody is amazing, because in order to expand access to care, we have to have many different formats, because they're really, there's diverse types of employers with different ways that they want to support their employees. So I think it's really amazing that we're seeing that in the marketplace. And employers really want to know, what is the value we're bringing to our employees? So especially for employers who are not supporting unlimited fertility care, if there's some kind of financial limit, which is still sadly the case for most employers, but we need to work with that. I mean, they're constantly expanding their budget, but still we need to support what is the best that they can get. But how about the traditional way of doing it is, hey, let's just reimburse the doctors less. Um, that's not value. So I think there's more and more a realization that that is not the best model. That does not give back the best support to the employees. So what employers want, and it doesn't have to be that, there is a way to help support costs and cap costs without kind of penalizing the providers. And so what employers really want to see is, how are our employees supported in that navigation? Do they understand, the pros and cons of different treatments? And do they understand that there may be an out-of-pocket cost later? Because when employers are not providing unlimited coverage, that means what we see. So Univfy's firsthand experience from that is usually when some patients, they initially have coverage. So let's say the employers gave them 20,000 or even 30,000, which is not ideal, but is really good as a start. So employees go in with coverage. So they feel relaxed. Maybe they didn't ask a lot of questions. Maybe they didn't fully understand what that there might be multiple cycles. I'm sure the doctors explain it, but maybe they just didn't hear it a certain way. And it's because there's a lot of overwhelming amount of information in that counseling session. And then they go through the first cycle and it's covered. Great. But if it doesn't work, and now they realize, oh, I'm on my own. So what we're seeing a lot is that some employees that have initially have coverage, they become patients with no coverage after the first cycle. And because they hadn't planned on that, and they might say they might say, oh, had I known, I would have planned this way. Had I known, I wish our employer could have supported a multi-cycle program. Because now we're suddenly like the employees is out of pocket and really cannot afford a second cycle. And then the employers might also feel like, oh, we funded our employees. How come there's still people coming back saying they didn't have a baby, right? So I think we're seeing more and more of those questions coming from employers, and I think there's a really good way to set expectations and really ultimately, being able to expand access to care by kind of like making that whole navigation seamless and supported by personalized prognosis and tying that to a really good, financial plan. So maybe initially it's the employee and employer, maybe they chip in, to support a program, or at least give the employee that option to chip in. So those are some of the concepts that are coming through right now.
Covered a lot of ground today. We talked about narrow AI and machine learning, how it's used by Univfy to remove financial risks, how individualized predictive outcomes are necessary because otherwise you can err on one side of the spectrum of overselling or underselling or being unclear, and you don't have to rely on human temperament or opinion. You have hard data to use. We talked about how you actually implement that with integrating into EMRs, making sure that there isn't data duplication, that you're accounting for the different uses that people use their EMRs for, using provider reports that can be pulled for the provider, and Univfy Fertility Concierge can help run those reports and insert them into different points of the workflow. We talk about how you come up with a pricing model for all of this in a way that works for the clinics. And we also talked about even how business analytics comes to be research for the field once it becomes aggregated. And I wish that you were in an event that happened just yesterday and people were asking about the tools for IVF conversion, because people really want these tools. And so I recommend to those of you, even if you're still checking out Univfy, or even to use it for yourself, this is free. If you go to univfy.com/IVF patient retention, but most of you aren't going to remember it. You're going to go to your phones and click on the link. And so it's going to work and bring you there anyway. And you can download this. It's free to be able to see what it looks like when you have if you have 100 patients on general, the different points of dropout. And so go ahead and take it, go ahead, download it, and plug in you can point to your own workflow and numbers. I encourage everybody to do that. For Dr. Yao's part, you given the audience so much today, how would you like to conclude either about the challenges of IVF conversion and patient dropout in the field, or what Univfy is doing to solve them, or what Univfy is doing with artificial intelligence? How would you like to conclude?
I really appreciate this chance to, chat about the different ways to use the Univfy AI platform. And I would say, there's a lot that all of us, meaning providers, companies, all the stakeholders in the fertility space, there's a lot that all of us need to do and can do so that we can help more patients to have a family. And in fact, I think we have a shared vision in this space, which is great. We all just want, um, you know, everybody who wants to have a family should be able to have one. And we should be able to provide very equitable, high quality care. Can do it in so many ways, whether you are advancing therapeutics, advancing diagnostics, advancing other types of personalized care, or advancing, a better way to, make IVF care or fertility care in general more feasible, more affordable to patients and employers that want to support them. I think, there is a way to use the technology that we can provide. It's going to take so many people and so many companies to come together to really accelerate this, access to care vision. So we would love to be able to support whatever it is that you're doing, whether you're on the business side, on care or research. Univfy has the technology to help you accelerate, your vision.
Dr. Mylene Yao, thank you so much for coming on the Inside Reproductive Health podcast.
Thank you, Griffin.
You've been listening to the Inside Reproductive Health podcast with Griffin Jones. If you're ready to take action to make sure that your practice thrives beyond the revolutionary changes that are happening in our field and in society, visit fertilitybridge.com to begin the first piece of the fertility marketing system, the goal and competitive diagnostic. Thank you for listening to Inside Reproductive Health.